Good evening, everyone. Tonight we enter a world of powder and blood, a story of empires built on leaves and shattered by bullets. This is not a tale of moral weakness or personal failure. This is the story of a simple plant. For thousands of years, it grew quietly on a mountainside. Then, science, commerce and human hunger changed it forever. They turned it into the most profitable item in modern history, and also the most destructive. Before we start, if you like deep stories about history's dark corners, please take a second to like this video and subscribe. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and the time there. It's amazing to see our global community come together like this. Now get comfortable. What you will hear next may change how you see the world today. Let's begin. Before the powder, before the cartels, before the bodies filled the streets, there was just a leaf. A simple plain leaf called Erythroxylum coca. It grows on a small bush, maybe 5 feet tall. It has tiny green-white flowers and little red fruit. The leaves are oval, about the size of your thumb. They have a waxy coat that shines under the Andean sun. These leaves grew on the Andes mountain slopes for millions of years, long before any human found them. Our story starts not in a lab, but high in the Andes thin air, maybe 5,000 years ago. In places now called Peru and Bolivia, native people found something special. If you put the leaves in your mouth, if you chew them slowly with a little ash or lime, something changes. The deep hunger from living 2 miles high fades away. The tiredness from farming steep mountain slopes lifts. The bitter cold of the high-altitude night feels less cruel. The leaf did not make you high, not like we think of drugs. It made you feel complete. It made survival possible. The Inca people built the greatest empire in the Americas before Columbus. They knew the power of the coca leaf very well. To them, it was not just a plant. It was a gift from Mama Coca, the goddess of the earth. The leaf was a sacred part of their spiritual and social life. They used it in religious ceremonies, in healing rituals, in times of joy and sadness. Priests carried coca leaves to high peaks as offerings to the gods. Miners chewed coca to survive the brutal work in dark silver mines. But the Inca understood something else about the leaf. They understood its power to control people. Coca was not free for everyone. Its use was controlled, a privilege from the state. Nobles could use it freely. Common people got small rations, just enough to keep them working and obedient. It was a tool for social order, a way to get work from people living in a very harsh land. The Inca mastered the first rule of drug economics. Control the supply and you control the people. Then, in 1530, everything changed. Francisco Pizarro and his Spanish soldiers arrived. They brought horses, steel, guns, and smallpox. The Inca Empire ruled 10 million people across mountains and jungle. It fell apart in just a few years. The Spanish did not care about the spiritual meaning of coca. They wanted gold and silver, and the Andes were full of both. But getting these metals needed labor, terrible crushing labor in deadly mines. The Spanish soon learned what the Inca knew for centuries. Coca made the impossible possible. Aimon chewing coca leaves could work longer in the thin mountain air. He felt less hunger, less tiredness, less hopelessness. So the Spanish ignored the Catholic Church's early ban on coca. The church called it a tool of the devil, but the Spanish became its biggest promoters. They built huge coca plantations. They paid their enslaved native workers not with money, but with leave. It was a perfect system of abuse. The sacred leaf became fuel for a genocide. Millions of native people died in those mines. Their suffering was eased and extended by the very plant their ancestors loved. For 300 years, coca remained a local thing. It was used all over the Andes, a daily necessity for native and mixed-race people. But to the wider world, it was just a curiosity, nothing more. Travelers to South America wrote about it in their journals. They described the strange habit of Indians, who seemed to live on leaves and potatoes. But the leaf was fragile. Its active parts broke down quickly once bit. You could not ship it across an ocean and keep its power. Coca was trapped by its own nature, stuck in the mountains where it grew. But the world was changing. The age of empire was ending, the age of science was beginning. In European labs, a new kind of chemist was unlocking nature's secrets. They learned to isolate, to purify, to concentrate. They took the messy power of plants and made it clean and precise. They made something you could put in a bottle and sell. In the middle of the 1800s, they looked at the coca leaf. What they would make would not stay in the mountains. It would travel the globe and change everything. The year was 1859. In the German city of Göttingen, a young chemist worked. His name was Albert Niemann. He worked in the lab of Friedrich Wöhler, a famous scientist. Niemann was smart, careful, and ambitious. He was working on his doctoral thesis. He chose a hard project to isolate the active part of the coca leaf. Others had tried before him. French chemists got rough extracts from coca, but they were impure and unstable. Niemann wanted to do better. He got a shipment of coca leaves from South America. Faster steamships made this easier in the 1850s. He dried the leaves, ground them to powder, and began the slow chemical work. He used alcohol to dissolve the plant material. Then he treated it with acid, then with alkali. He filtered it, evaporated it, and crystallized it. It was slow, exact work, needing great patience. After many weeks, he finally succeeded. He isolated a pure white crystalline powder. It tasted bitter and made his tongue feel numb. Niemann did not know what he had just created. He wrote his findings in his dissertation, published in 1860. He described the compound's chemical properties. He gave it a name based on its source plant. He calls it cocaine. The paper was dry, academic, and ordinary in tone. It was not an announcement of a miracle. It was just science. Niemann could not know this white powder would one day be worth more than gold, that it would break governments, fund armies, and kill countless people. He died just 2 years later at age 26 from lung disease. He never saw what his discovery would become. For the next 20 years, cocaine was mostly a lab curiosity. A few scientists tested it, noting its stimulating effects and its numbing power, but it had no clear use. It sat in glass jars in university labs waiting. The world was not ready for cocaine yet, but soon it would be. The real champion of cocaine was not a chemist. He was a young neurologist in Vienna struggling for fame and money. His name was Sigmund Freud. In 1884, Freud was 28 years old. He was engaged to Martha Bernays, but he was poor. His medical career was stuck. He needed to make a name for himself, to publish something big. He read about cocaine in medical papers, about its stimulating traits. He became obsessed with the idea it could be a miracle drug. He ordered a sample from the drug company Merck, which now made it. When it arrived, he tested it on himself. The effects felt miraculous to Freud. A tiny dose in water brought excitement, mental clarity, and endless energy. His sadness lifted, his stomach problems seemed to vanish. For the first time in years, he felt in control of his own mind. He was overjoyed, not just from the drug, but from believing he found something great. Freud began to write. He wrote fast and feverishly with the manic energy cocaine gave him. In July 1884, he published a paper called Über Coca, or On Coca. It was a love letter to the drug. He described its effects in glowing words. He said it could treat sadness, stomach troubles, asthma, and even work as a love potion. Most importantly, he said, it could cure morphine addiction. The idea was simple. Cocaine was stimulating, morphine was sedating. Give cocaine to a morphine addict to fight withdrawal and get them off morphine. It was a theory built on hope and personal experience, not on solid science. Freud sent cocaine to his friends, to his fiancée, to his colleagues. He called it his magical drug. He even gave it to a close friend, Ernst von Fleischl-Marxow. Marxow was a bright doctor addicted to morphine after an injury. Freud believed he was helping. He believed he was saving his friend's life. But Fleischl-Marxow did not stop using morphine. He added cocaine to his routine. His addiction did not switch, it doubled. He began taking huge doses of cocaine, sometimes a gram a day. His health fell apart fast. He became paranoid, hallucinatory, a shell of his former self. He died a few years later, ruined by the drug Freud promised would save him. The medical world was first interested by Freud's excitement. Other doctors began testing cocaine. Then one doctor made a discovery that changed medicine forever. Carl Koller, a colleague of Freud, was an eye doctor. He read Freud's paper and remembered how cocaine numbed the tongue. He wondered, could it be used to numb an area locally? In September 1884, Koller did an experiment. He dissolved cocaine in water and put it on a frog's eye. Then he touched the eye with a needle. The frog did not react. The eye was totally numb. He tried it on a rabbit, then a dog. Finally, he tried it on himself and a colleague. The results were amazing. Within minutes, the eye felt no pain. Koller had found the first good local anesthetic. It was a real breakthrough, one of the biggest in surgery history. Suddenly, cocaine was everywhere in medicine. Surgeons used it for eye operations, for dental work, for small surgeries. It was called a godsend. Patients no longer needed full sleep for simple procedures. Risks were lower, recovery was faster. For a short, bright moment, cocaine was a hero. But the other uses Freud pushed for treating sadness, tiredness, and addiction. These were turning into a disaster. Doctors across Europe and America began prescribing cocaine freely. Drug companies made it in tonics, pills, and shots. And people began to use it. Not just patients, but anyone who wanted a boost or an escape. The problem showed itself quickly. Cocaine, unlike coca leaf, was concentrated and pure. When you snorted powdered cocaine or shot it into your vein, you did not get the mild, steady lift from chewing leaves. You got a huge, immediate rush of drug to your brain. It felt amazing, like the best version of yourself, like you could rule the world. Then, within an hour, it was gone. The crash was terrible. The sadness, the exhaustion, the need to feel that way again. It all came back worse than before. Users developed a pattern. They would take a dose, feel great, crash, and take more. The cycle sped up. People who started cocaine for medical reasons could not stop. They became jittery, paranoid, unable to sleep. Some had scary hallucinations, the feeling of bugs under their skin. Doctors called this cocaine psychosis. On the street, they called it cocaine bugs. Users would scratch their skin raw, thinking they were infested. By the 1890s, reports of cocaine addiction were flooding in. Respectable doctors, patients, even pharmacists with access were getting hooked. Freud himself, though he publicly played down the risks, quietly stopped using it. His reputation was stained. He had promoted a drug now seen as dangerous. He spent his later life trying to move away from his early cocaine work. He focused instead on his theories of the mind. But the damage was done. The genie was out of the bottle. Cocaine was in the public mind, and not everyone saw it as trouble. To many, it was just a new product, a modern chemistry marvel. In the new world of consumer capitalism, someone saw a chance. Not to heal the sick, but to sell to everyone. The leaf had become powder. The powder was about to become an empire. In the late 19th century, the world felt a chemical excitement. The public, amazed by fast science progress, believed any problem could be solved. The right mix, the right tonic, the right pill could fix anything. Patent medicines fueled the market. Bottled drinks with names like Dr. Kilmer's Swamp and Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup. They promised to cure consumption, nerves, exhaustion, everything. Most were useless, but many had cocaine, morphine, alcohol, or all three. There weren't no rules. No one checked if a product worked as claimed. No one tested for safety. If you could make it and market it well, you could sell it. And the makers were very, very good at marketing. One product rose above all others. It became the most famous brand in history, a symbol of American capitalism itself. And in its first recipe, it had cocaine. In 1886, in Atlanta, Georgia, a pharmacist worked in his backyard. His name was John Stiff Pemberton. He mixed syrups and extracts. Pemberton was a Confederate veteran hurt in the Civil War. Like many veterans, he used morphine for his pain. He was looking for a cure tonic to ease his suffering. He read about coke and its amazing traits. He also read about the colon at a West African stimulant with caffeine. He decided to mix them. He made a syrup from coca leaf extract and colon at extract. He added sugar, caramel color, and other flavors. He sold it as a brain-tonic and smart drink, a cure for headaches, nerves, and sadness. He called it Coca-Cola. At first, it was a syrup sold at soda fountains. Mixed with fizzy water, it was a refreshing drink. The cocaine was not hidden, it was advertised. The coca leaf was right there in the name. Pemberton said his drink could cure morphine addiction, alcoholism, and indigestion. The irony was he was treating one addiction by possibly starting another. Pemberton was better at making formulas than at business. He sold the rights to Coca-Cola just before he died in 1888. The buyer was a businessman named Dosa Candela. Candela was a marketing genius. He covered the country with ads, gave free samples, and built a brand. He was wholesome, refreshing, and all-American. By the 1900s, Coca-Cola was sold across the United States. It was the drink of the modern era. But Coca-Cola was not alone. Many other coca products filled the market. There was Vin Mariani, a French tonic wine, made with coca leaf. It was hugely popular in Europe and the US. Pope Leo XII endorsed it, and reportedly carried a flask. Thomas Edison drank it. Queen Victoria drank it. Jules Verne and Henrik Ibsen praised it. It was sold as a classy, healthy drink for smart people. Then there were the more medical products. Cocaine to foot drops for teething babies. Cocaine lozenges for singers and speakers to numb throats. Cocaine-laced cigarettes, cigars, and chewing gum. You could buy pure cane powder from a catalog. No prescription needed. A gram of pure coke cost about $1, less than a good meal. For a short time from about 1885 to 1905, cocaine was everywhere. It was in your medicine cabinet, at your soda fountain, in your cigarette case. It was the drug of good society, taken by everyone from workers to lord. No one called themselves an addict. They were just modern people using modern medicine. But under the shiny ads and praise from popes and inventors, something dark was growing. The same problems from Freud's patients began appearing everywhere. Factory workers using cocaine for long shifts found they could not quit. Society women taking it for nerves became thin and paranoid. The poor and homeless found a hit of cocaine could briefly hide their misery. They gathered pennies to buy it again and again. The medical world, first so quick to embrace cocaine, began to turn against it. Reports of addictions, psychosis, and death appeared in medical journals. In 1902, the Journal of the American Medical Association warned of cocaine dangers. Public opinion was changing. Then race became part of the story. In the American South, a moral panic took hold. Newspapers printed wild stories about black men using cocaine and committing crimes. These stories were mostly made up, rooted in the deep racism of the Jim Crow era. But they worked. The myth of the cocaine-crazed Negro became common and cheap news. They claimed cocaine made black men superhuman, immune to pain, and sexually aggressive. There was even a false idea spread by police that cocaine made black men harder to kill, that they needed more bullets to stop them. This racist fear gave political power to America's first major drug law. In 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Act passed. It required products to list ingredients on the label. Coca-Cola, seeing the future, quietly took cocaine out of its formula around 1903. It added more caffeine and you spent coca leaves for flavor only. Leaves with cocaine already removed. The real blow came in 1914 with the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act. This law hurt the heroin trade too. It put strict controls on cocaine undoped distribution. This ended the era of buying cocaine over the counter. Doctors could still prescribe it, but rules were so tough most just stopped. In a few years, the legal cocaine market was dead. Cocaine did not vanish, of course. It just went underground. The same things that made it profitable legally. The intense high, the powerful craving, the user's willingness to pay, made it even more profitable illegally. By the 1920s, cocaine joined alcohol during Prohibition. It became an underworld product, run by gangsters, sold in speakers, i.e.s., used by people on society's edges, jazz musicians, prostitutes, criminals, artists. But for most of the mid-20th century, cocaine was a minor drug next to heroin. It was costly, hard to get, and used only in small subcultures. America looked at other drugs. Marijuana in the 1930s, LSD in the 1960s, heroin in the 1970s. Cocaine seemed almost old-fashioned, a leftover from a pastime. A small note in the history of drug scares. That all changed in the 1970s. The drug that was tamed and pushed into darkness was about to return loudly. This time it would not be doctors or pharmacists or soda sellers handing it out. It would be cartels. They would build an empire on white powder. An empire that made the patent medicine era look like a child's game. Cocaine's return as a mass product began not in US cities, but in South American mountains and jungles in the late 1960s and early 70s. The coca plant was still grown by native farmers in Peru and Bolivia, just as it had been for thousands of years. But now there was a new market, a hungry, profitable, growing market, the United States. The counterculture movement of the 60s made Americans more open to drug tryouts. Marijuana and LSD weren't drugs for hippies and rebels. But cocaine had a different pull. It was not about dropping out or tuning in. Cocaine was about power, confidence, winning. It was the drug of ambition. In the 1970s or 60s hopes, or into 70s doubt, cocaine found its people. The early cocaine trade was small, almost handmade. Cuban exiles in Miami with South American links began smuggling small amounts into Florida. The profits were huge. A kilo of cocaine bought in Colombia for $1,500 could be sold in Miami for $50,000 or more. This business chance drew smart, ruthless, ambitious criminals. One early player was a Chilean chemist named Mateo Cockroach Moreno, but he was minor compared to what came next. The real builders of the modern cocaine trade were not chemists or smugglers. They were businessmen. The most successful, most ruthless, most famous of them all came from a city that would become another name for cocaine, Medellin in Colombia. Colombia was the perfect place for a cocaine empire. It had no history of big coca farming. That was Peru and Bolivia. But it had something more valuable: geography and setup. Colombia had both Pacific and Caribbean coasts, great for smuggling to North America. It had remote jungles for hidden land. And crucially, it had a smuggling culture. For decades, Colombian criminals moved emeralds, marijuana, and contraband cigarettes. They knew the routes, they knew how to bribe officials, they knew how to move goods. In the mid-1970s, a few traffickers in Medellin began to organize. They saw the key to ruling the cocaine trade was not growing coca. Let Peruvians and Bolivians do that. The key was controlling the processing and the delivery. They would buy coca paste from farmers in Peru and Bolivia, move it to Colombia, refine it into pure cocaine powder in jungle labs, then smuggle it into the United States. Making cocaine is fairly simple, but it needs chemicals: acetone, ether, sulfuric acid. The Colombian traffickers made deals with chemical suppliers. They often bribed government people to ignore them. They built labs in remote areas, zones controlled by guerrilla groups like the FARC. They made shaky deals with these fighters. By the late 1970s, several big trafficking groups appeared. They worked alone at first, but soon saw cooperation made more money than fighting. They started to coordinate shipments, share information, and split territories. This loose group became the Medellin cartel. Its leader became the most famous criminal ever. His name was Pablo Emilio Escobar. Escobar was born in 1949 in Rio Negro near Medellin. His family was lower middle class. His father was a farmer, his mother a teacher. Young Escobar was a hustler. He stole tombstones, sandblasted off the names, and sold them again. He stole cars, he tried kidnapping. But he was clever, charming, and had no morals. When he entered the cocaine trade in the mid-70s, he brought a vision. He wanted not just a business, but an empire. Escobar knew the key to winning was controlling every step. He did not want to be just a middleman. He wanted control from the coca fields to Miami streets. He bought his own planes, boats, warehouses. He hired chemists, accountants, lawyers, and an army of hitmen called sicarios. He also knew the value of public image. In Medellin, he made himself a Robin Hood figure. He built soccer fields, housing projects, a whole neighborhood for the poor called Barrio Pablo Escobar. He gave money to people in need. He was a hero to the slums, a man from nothing who gave back. This was not pure kindness, it was a plan. The poor of Medellin became his shield, his informants, and we needed his soldiers. By the early 1980s, the Medellin cartel moved tons of cocaine into the US each month. The scale was unbelievable. They used every method possible. Small planes flying low under radar, landing on remote airstrips in Florida or Louisiana. Speedboats across the Caribbean, cargo ships with hidden rooms, even submarines. They bribed everyone: police, judges, politicians, army officers. In Colombia, the phrase Plato o plomo, silver or lead, bribe or bullet, became the cartel's motto. The money was beyond understanding. At his peak, Pablo Escobar supposedly earned $420 million a week. Forbes magazine called him the world's seventh richest man. He had so much cash, he spent $2,500 a month just on rubber bands to bundle it. He kept money in warehouses where rats chewed up millions of dollars. He did not care, it was a tiny loss. But with that wealth came violence, unbelievable violence. The Medellin cartel did not accept problems. If a police officer looked too close, he died. If a journalist wrote a bad story, he died. If a politician refused to bribe, his whole family died. Car bombs became common in Medellin and Bogota. Judges were murdered at home. Pilots were shot from the sky. In 1980, the Colombian government, pushed by the United States, started a crackdown. Justice Minister Rodrigo Lara Bonilla publicly insulted Escobar and pushed to send him to the US. On April 30, 1980, Lara Bonilla was killed by cartel hitmen on a motorcycle. It was a war declaration. The Colombian government, shamed and angry, allowed extradition of traffickers to the US. The cartel saw this as a death sentence. Escobar's answer was to increase violence to almost medieval levels. He declared total war on the Colombian state. But even as the Medellin cartel took the news, another group was quietly building its own empire. They worked differently. They were less showy, more disciplined, and in some ways more dangerous. They were based in Cali, Colombia, a second city. They would show there was more than one way to build a drug empire. While Pablo Escobar built a personality cult and fought the government, the Cali cartel leaders built a company. They saw themselves as businessmen, not gangsters. They wore suits, not gold chains. They liked bribes more than bullets. And they were in many ways more successful than the Medellin rivals. The Cali cartel was run by men from good backgrounds. The Rodriguez or Ejule brothers Gilberto and Miguel started as kidnappers in the 70s, then moved to cocaine. Jose Santa Cruz Londono ran cartel's New York operations. Helma Pocho Herrera managed routes through Mexico. They worked like a big corporation. They had a board of directors, an accounting office, a legal team, even spy units. They put profits into real businesses, drug companies, construction firms, radio stations, soccer teams. They cleaned money through a complex web of fake companies across many countries. Their use of violence was more careful. They did not kill for fun, they killed when business needed it. They avoided big public attacks that brought government attention. Where Escobar blew up a passenger plane to kill one politician, killing 110 innocents. The Cali cartel liked quiet murders, making deaths look like accidents or suicides. The Cali cartel also mastered a new method: infiltration. They did not just bribe low-level officials. They corrupted whole organizations. They paid judges, police chiefs, generals, top politicians. Rumor said they had people inside the presidential palace itself. By the late 1980s, the two cartels controlled maybe 80% of the world's cocaine. They made billions each year. That money was tearing Colombia apart. The country was in a low-level civil war. Thousands died every year. The government was almost broken. But the cartels also faced a new issue. The United States was no longer happy just arresting street dealers. The Reagan administration declared a war on drugs in the early 80s. That war was about to go worldwide, and the US cocaine was no longer a rich person's drug. I knew from appeared on the streets crack cocaine. Crack was just cocaine powder turned into rocks you could smoke. The process was simple: mix cocaine with baking soda and water, heat it, let it harden. The result was a product sold in small cheap doses, $5 or $10. This made it available to the poor. The crack high was strong and instant, much more than snorted powder. But it lasted only minutes, creating a desperate need for more. It was the perfect product for addiction. It spread through US inner cities like fire. By the mid-1980s, the crack epidemic was raging. Los Angeles, New York, Miami, Detroit, every big US city was hit. Crime rates shot up. Emergency rooms were full. A generation of kids grew up in homes broken by addiction. The violence was worse than anything in peacetime. Gangs fought brutal wars over crack areas. Murder rates in cities like Washington, D.C. and New Orleans matched war zones. The American public, scared by crack, demanded action. The government answered with harsh laws. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 set mandatory prison terms for drug crimes. Having 5 grams of crack, about the weight of 2 pennies, meant a 5-year minimum sentence. The same sentence for 500 grams of powder cocaine. This difference 100 to 1 hurt black communities more. Crack was more common in black areas, powder cocaine in white areas. A whole generation of young black men went to prison, destroying families and communities. But the local crackdown was only one part of the plan. The Reagan and later Bush governments decided to win the drug war by attacking the source. Destroy the cartels in Colombia. The US gave billions in aid to Colombia, plus military advisors, intelligence and gear. The goal was to send cartel leaders to the US for American justice. Pablo Escobar saw this as a threat to his existence. Extradition to the US meant life in a tough prison with no bribes or escape. He would do anything to stop it. So in the late 80s, he started a terror campaign to break the Colombian government. The term narcoterrorism was born for what Escobar unleashed on Colombia from 1989 to 1993. It was terrorism for the drug trade, using fear and violence for political goals. And it worked for a while. Escobar's main target was the government's extradition policy. To stop it, he attacked anyone who supported it. In August 1989, a top presidential candidate, Luis Carlos Galen, was killed at a rally. Galen strongly supported extradition and was likely to win the presidency. His murder shocked Colombia. 3 men on motorcycles drove to his stage and opened fire. It was bold public and sent a message: no one was safe. The government response was fast. President Virgilio Barco brought back the extradition treaty with the US and arrested cartel members. Escobar answered by bombing government buildings, police stations, and political party offices. In November 1989, he ordered the bombing of Aviacan Flight 203, a passenger plane. The plane blew up in the sky, killing all 107 people aboard. The target was one presidential candidate who was supposed to be on the plane but changed plans. 110 innocent people died for nothing. A week later, Escobar bombed the DIS building, Colombia SBI headquarters. A truck with over 1,000 pounds of dynamite exploded. It killed 63 people, hurt over 600, and wrecked a whole city block in Bogota. The message was clear: Escobar could hit anywhere, anytime, and the government could not stop him. But Escobar's worst trick was kidnapping. He targeted families of Colombia's elite: journalists, politicians, business leaders. He held them hostage to pressure the government. One famous hostage was Diana T. Uribe, a well-known journalist and a former president's daughter. She was held for months, then killed during a failed police rescue. Colombians lived in constant fear. No one knew where the next bomb would be. Parents kept kids home from school. People avoided malls, movie theaters, soccer games. The country's economy, already weak, started to collapse under the violence. Tourism vanished for money, dried up. Colombia was becoming a failed state. But Escobar made a big mistake. In his pride, he thought the Colombian government would finally give up, that they would drop extradition and leave him alone. He did not see that by killing innocent people, by bombing planes and buildings, he turned the whole country against him. He also made a powerful enemy, the Colle cartel. The Colle cartel saw a chance. While Escobar fought the government, they made money. But Escobar's war brought unwanted attention to all cocaine trade. DI agents poured into Colombia. The Colombian military cracked down on everyone, not just the Medellin cartel. The Colle leaders decided Pablo Escobar was bad for business. So they did something new. They joined the government to take him down. They made a paramilitary group called Los Pepies, perseguidos por Pablo Escobar, or people persecuted by Pablo Escobar. Los Pepies was funded by the Colle cartel, staffed by right-winged paramilitaries and cartel hitmen, quietly supported by parts of the Colombian police and army. Their mission was simple: destroy everything Pablo Escobar cared about. Los Pepies worked with ruthless speed. They burned Escobar's properties, all of them, his ranches, mansions, safe houses. They killed his lawyers, accountants, bodyguards, couriers. They killed his relatives, bombing his cousins and brothers' homes. They even killed his lieutenants' families. The message was clear: if you worked for Pablo Escobar, everyone you loved would die. At the same time, the Colombian government made an elite police unit, the Search Block. Its only job was to find and kill Escobar. They were trained and equipped by the DINC. They used high-tech tools, electronic surveillance gear to track cell-phone calls. And they had something else: intelligence from Los Pepies and the Colle cartel. Escobar was now hunted by three groups: the Colombian government, Los Pepies, and his rival traffickers. He was trapped in Medellin, unable to move, unable to trust anyone. His organization was falling apart. His money, though still huge, was hard to reach. His family fled Germany seeking safety, but was sent back to Colombia. Desperate to end the war, Escobar made a deal to surrender in 1991. The terms were incredible. He would admit to one crime, serve a short sentence, and live in a prison he designed on his own land. The prison, called La Catedral, was less a jail and more a luxury resort. It had a soccer field, a bar, a waterfall, and a view of Medellin. Escobar kept running his business from inside, even ordering murders and moving cocaine. But this could not last. In July 1992, news broke that Escobar tortured and killed two of his own men inside the prison. The government moved to put him in a real prison. Escobar escaped just walking out the back door before soldiers arrived. He went back into hiding and the hunt began again. For the next 16 months, Escobar lived on the run. He moved from safe house to safe house, often alone or with one bodyguard. He grew a beard, dyed his hair, wore disguises. But he could not stop calling his family. These calls, made through cell towers, were tracked by the Search Block with CIA technology. On December 2nd, 1993, Escobar called his son. The call lasted just long enough. The Search Block found his location in a middle-class Medellin neighborhood. They surrounded the house. Escobar, knowing he was trapped, grabbed a gun and tried to run across the roof. He was shot many times by Search Block officers. He died on a red tile roof, barefoot, with a bullet in his head. He was 44 years old. Photos of his body went around the world. In Colombia, people danced in the streets. The nightmare was over, but the party was too early. Pablo Escobar was dead, but the cocaine trade was not. The Medellin cartel fell, but the Colle cartel was stronger than ever. And new players were entering the game. Players from a country sharing a 2,000-mile border with the United States, Mexico. For most of the 80s and early 90s, Mexican traffickers were junior partners in cocaine. They did not make cocaine, they just moved it across the border for the Colombians. The Colombians paid them a fee, often a share of the shipment. The Mexicans handled the logistics of getting it into the US. But the Mexicans were watching. They saw how much money the Colombians made. They realized the real profit was not in growing coca or even making cocaine. The real profit was in the last step, getting it across the border and into US streets. Control the border, control the trade. The Mexican drug trade had a long history. In the early 20th century, Mexican traffickers moved alcohol into the US during Prohibition. After Prohibition, they switched to marijuana and heroin. By the 80s, several big trafficking groups worked in Mexico. Each controlled a specific plaza, a smuggling path across the border. The strongest early group was the Guadalajara cartel, led by Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, called El Padrino, the Godfather. Felix Gallardo was smooth, well-connected and smart. He had ties to top Mexican politicians and police. He changed the Mexican drug trade from small-time smugglers to a professional business. But in 1985, everything changed. A DEA agent named Enrique Kitty Camarena worked in Guadalajara investigating the cartel. He was getting close, gathering proof that implicated traffickers and Mexican officials. On February 7, 1985, Camarena was kidnapped in daylight off the street. He was taken to a cartel member's house and tortured for over 30 hours. His screams were recorded. He was beaten, burned, his skull crushed. His body and his pilots were left on a roadside. Killing a DEA agent on foreign soil was new. The US government was furious. They started Operation Camarena, a huge investigation pressing the Mexican government hard. Felix Gallardo, hidden in the Guadalajara cartel, began to break. In 1989, Felix Gallardo was arrested. But before his arrest, he did something that shaped the Mexican drug trade for 30 years. He divided the plazas among his top men. To the Arellano Felix brothers, he gave Tijuana. To Joaquin El Chapo Guzman and Ismael El Mayo Zambada, he gave Sinaloa. To the Carrillo Fuentes family, he gave Juarez. To Juan Garcia Abrego, he gave the Gulf Coast. These men would build their own cartels, each controlling a path into the US. And as the Colombian cartels fell, first Medellin and then Cali, the Mexicans moved to fill the space. By the mid-90s, they were no longer just transporters. They bought cocaine straight from Colombian producers and took over the whole supply chain. The power shift was dramatic. The Mexicans were closer to the US market. They had better smuggling routes and, most importantly, they were ready to be more violent than anyone. The change came in 2006. New Mexican President Felipe called and declared war on the cartels. He sent the Mexican army to drug hotspots, arrested cartel leaders, and sent many traffickers to the US. It was a bold move to show Mexico was serious about fighting drugs, but it failed terribly. Instead of weakening the cartels, Calderon's plan broke them. It turned a few big stable groups into many smaller, more violent gangs, all fighting for land. The result was a massacre. The Mexican drug war started in 2006 and still goes on today. It has killed about 350,000 people. That is more than all US combat deaths in World War II. Whole towns are empty. Mass graves with hundreds of bodies are found. Journalists reporting on cartels are murdered. Politicians against them are killed. Police get a choice: Plato o Plomo, silver, or lead, take the bribe or take the bullet. The violence took shapes meant to terrify. Cartels left bodies in public, with messages attached, narcomentis, threatening rivals or the government. They filmed killings and posted them online. They hung bodies from bridges. They dissolved victims in acid barrels. They used beheading as a terror tactic before IS made it famous. The Zetas, a cartel made by ex-Mexican special forces soldiers, became the most feared criminal group. They were not regular drug traffickers. They were a paramilitary group that also moved drugs. They did kidnapping, extortion, human trafficking, oil theft. They killed whole villages suspected of helping rivals. In 2011, they killed 70 migrants who refused to be drug mules. They lined them up and shot them. The cartels also improved their smuggling methods. They built complex tunnels under the US-Mexico border. The tunnels had air systems, light rail track. They used semi-submarines to move cocaine from Colombia to Mexico by sea. They used drones to fly drugs over the border. They even built catapults to throw marijuana packages over the fence. But maybe their best method was the simplest. They drove it across in trucks. The US-Mexico border is one of the busiest worldwide. Thousands of vehicles cross daily. Searching them all is impossible. Cartels hid cocaine in secret compartments in cars and real goods, even in animal bodies going to slaughterhouses. By the 2010s, Mexican cartels controlled maybe 90% of cocaine entering the US. They became the strongest criminal groups in the Americas. They made maybe $13 billion a year. They corrupted whole police forces, but governors and mayors got into the military. And they diversified. As US states legalized marijuana, hurting cartel profits, they shifted focus. They started making synthetic drugs, meth and most recently fentanyl. They also expanded to new markets: Europe, Asia, Australia. Cocaine was no longer just an American problem, it was a global one. But even as cartels grew stronger, something else happened. Cocaine use in America changed. The crack epidemic of the 80s and 90s faded. Cocaine was no longer the drug of the poor and desperate. It became again the drug of the rich and successful. This change was clearest in the shiny towers of Wall Street. By the 2000s and 2010s, cocaine had made a full social circle. It went from medicine to plague to again a sign of success and power. But this time it was not sold at soda fountains. It was snorted in Manhattan penthouse bathrooms, Hollywood parties, London club. The new cocaine culture differed from the crack epidemic. It was quiet, expensive, exclusive. A gram of good cocaine in New York or Los Angeles cost $80 to $100, sometimes more. It was a luxury druggist at a symbol. It was everywhere in certain worlds: finance, entertainment, fashion, tech. On Wall Street, cocaine became part of the culture. Traders working 80-hour weeks used it to stay sharp, to keep the edge for million-dollar decisions. Parties after work, celebrations after big deals. Cocaine was as normal as champagne. It was not just young workers. Senior executives, hedge fund managers, investment bankers used it regularly. The entertainment world had a similar link with the drug. Cocaine was popular in Hollywood since the 70s. But in the 21st century, it reached new levels. Award shows, after parties, movie sets. Cocaine was just part of the scene. Actors, directors, musicians, producers used it for pressure, long hours, constant demand to perform. The tech industry also got its own cocaine issue. In Silicon Valley, culture praised disruption, excess, and breaking normal rules. Cocaine fit perfectly. Young entrepreneurs with venture capital money threw parties where cocaine was as available as craft beer. But the drug's link to power and success went deeper than just fun use. Cocaine became in many ways the fuel of modern capitalism. It was the drug that let people work longer, sleep less, keep an image of strength. It was the chemical form of the neoliberal idea: optimize produce, put individual performance above all. And unlike crack, treated as a moral flaw deserving harsh punishment, powder cocaine use among the wealthy got a kind of laughing tolerance. When a celebrity was caught with cocaine, it was a scandal that made them seem edgy. When a banker was arrested, they hired a pricey lawyer and got a light punishment. The double standard was obvious. Crack users, mostly poor and black, got decades in prison. Powder cocaine users, mostly rich and white, went to rehab. This difference was partly fixed in 2010. President Obama signed the Fair Sentencing Act. It changed the sentencing difference between crack and powder cocaine from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1. It was progress, but it did not fix the damage of the past 25 years. Hundreds of thousands were jailed under the old rules. But even as cocaine became normal in elite circles, its production destroyed South American regions. In Colombia, despite decades of eradication efforts, coke farming increased. Farmers kept planting because nothing else paid as well. The Colombian government, with billions in US aid, sprayed many acres with glyphosate, a strong weed killer. They tried to kill coca plants. But the spraying also killed legal crops, poisoned water, and caused health issues in rural areas. In Peru and Bolivia, coke farming spread into untouched rainforest. The environmental harm was huge. To clear land for coca fields, traffic A&S burned ancient forests. To process coca leaves into cocaine paste, they used toxic chemicals, sulfuric acid, gasoline, cement. These were dumped into rivers, poisoning water for native communities downstream. The cocaine trade also became a big part of Colombia's ongoing armed conflict. Guerrilla groups like the FARC and started as Marxist rebels in the 60s. They became narco-guerrillas, funding their work by taxing the cocaine trade. Right-wing paramilitary groups formed to fight guerrillas were also deep in trafficking. The conflict killed over 200,000 people and moved millions. It was tied tightly to cocaine. In 2016, the Colombian government and FARC signed a peace deal ending 52 years of war. But the cocaine trade did not end. New criminal groups called BAC or IM banned as criminals emerged. They were smaller, more broken, and sometimes more violent than the FARC. The peace benefit Colombians hoped for never fully came. And just as leaders started to handle the cocaine issue, the market shifted again. Cocaine use in the US dropping since the 90s began to rise again. But this time it was mixed with something deadlier, fentanyl. Dealers, wanting to stretch supply and increase strength, mixed cocaine with fentanyl. Many users did not know. They thought they bought pure cocaine. But fentanyl is 50 times stronger than heroin. This contaminant turned a fun drug into a deadly one. Overdose deaths with cocaine started to jump. In 2019, over 15,000 Americans died from cocaine-related overdoses, many because cocaine had fentanyl in it. The drug once used by doctors and pharmacists. The drug that built empires and broke governments. The drug that fueled the roaring 80s and the Mexican drug war was now part of a new, even deadlier epidemic. The powder that fooled the world was still fooling, still killing, still showing. No matter how we tried to control it, controlled us. In 1971, President Richard Nixon officially declared a war on drugs. He called drug abuse public enemy number one. He committed the US government to wiping out the drug trade. In the 50 years since that day, the US spent over $1 trillion on drug enforcement. It jailed millions of people. It made police more like soldiers. It sent troops and agents to many countries. And yet drugs are cheaper, purer, and easier to get than ever. Cocaine is the perfect example of prohibition's failure. Every strategy has been tried. Eradication, spraying coca fields with poison. Interdiction, seizing shipments at borders. Prosecution, arresting dealers and users. None of it worked. The reason is simple: economics. As long as rich countries like the US want drugs, there will be supply. The profit is too big. A farmer in Colombia makes maybe $1,000 for a year of coca farming. That same crop, after processing and moving, is worth $100,000 in Miami and $500,000 on New York Street. At each step, the possible profit is huge. When police take down one trafficking group, another rises instantly. When one smuggling path closes, traffickers find another. It's a game of whack-a-mole that cannot be won. The basic reason the money stays the same. The drug war also had terrible side effects. In the US, it caused mass jail time on a scale never seen before. The US has 5% of the world's people, but 25% of its prisoners. Much of this is for drug crimes. Over 1.5 million people are arrested for drug violations each year. Most are for simple possession. These arrests hurt communities of color more. Even with similar drug use across races, Black Americans are almost 6 times more likely to be jailed for drugs than white Americans. This created a bad cycle. Arrest leads to conviction, conviction leads to no job leads to poverty, poverty leads to crime, and the cycle repeats. The drug war also made US police more military. Programs like the 1033 program let local police get army gear. Small-town police now have armored cars, grenade launchers as old trifles. SWAT teams made for rare high-risk events now do routine drug raids. Thousands of no-knock warrants happen each year, often with tragic results. Innocent people have been killed in their own homes by police raiding the wrong place. Worldwide, the drug war destabilized whole region. In Latin America, US drug policy supported harsh regimes, funded paramilitary death squads, and added to violence, killing hundreds of thousands. Plan Colombia, a US aid package worth over $10 billion, helped Colombia fight cartels and guerrillas. But it also caused wide human rights abuses and did little to cut coca farming. In Mexico, the Merida Initiative, a similar aid package, armed and trained Mexican security forces. But those forces are often corrupt. The weapons and training sometimes went to the cartels. The Mexican drug war, heavily influenced by the US, created a humanitarian disaster. And yet, with all this failure, the drug war continued. Why? The answer is complex. Institutions have interests. Police get billions in funding for drug work. Private prisons make money jailing drug offenders. Politicians, afraid to look soft on crime, keep supporting tough drug laws. There is also a moral part. For many, especially older people, drug use is a moral failure and that should be punished. The idea of decriminalization or legalization is unthinkable. They believe harsh laws are needed to protect society, especially kids, from drug dangers. But this view is starting to change. Around the world, countries test new approaches. Portugal decriminalized all drugs in 2001. Instead of arresting drug users, they send them to treatment. The results are impressive. Overdose deaths fell sharply. HIV infections among drug users dropped a lot. Overall drug use went down. In the US, several states legalized marijuana. The sky did not fall, crime did not jump, teen use did not boom. Instead, states got new tax money in thousands, avoided criminal records. More people see addiction as a medical issue, not a criminal one. The best way to help people with substance abuse is not to jail them, but to give treatment, support and harm reduction services. But cocaine has special challenges. Unlike marijuana or even heroin, which have medical treatments, there is no medicine for cocaine addiction. The best treatments are behavioral, cognitive, behavioral therapy, contingency managements, support groups. These work, but they need resources, trained professionals, and a society willing to invest in healing, not punishment. Another challenge is cocaine, unlike opioids, does not cause clear withdrawal symptoms. A cocaine user can look normal, successful, even while hiding a bad addiction. This makes it easier for society to ignore the problem, to treat it as a personal flaw, not a public health crisis. So the cycle continues. Cocaine is made in South America, moved through Central America and Mexico, used in North America and Europe. People die from overdoses, from violence, from poisoned communities. Governments spend billions trying to stop it, and nothing changes. Behind every number, every drug seizure, every headline about a cartel leader, there are people. People whose lives were ruined by cocaine, either by their own use or by the trade's violence. Let's be clear about the human cost. In Colombia, whole generations grew up knowing only violence. Kids lost parents to cartel killings, to government trades, to fights between armed groups. Farmers desperate for a living chose between poverty and growing coca, knowing either choice could get them killed. Women became widows, were raped, were forced to leave home. Communities were torn apart. In Mexico, the drug war death toll is hard to grasp. 350,000 dead. 100,000 disappeared, gone without a trace. Their families have no answers, no closure. Mothers in Mexico spent years looking for their children, digging in hidden graves with bare hands, finding bones that might be their sons or daughters. In the US, the impact was different, but just as real. Millions were arrested and jailed for drug crimes. Their lives and their families' lives changed forever. Children grew up without parents. Communities were weakened. And the opioid crisis killed over 500,000 Americans in the last 20 years. It showed drug addiction is a colorblind killer. It hurt rural white towns as badly as it hurt urban black areas during the crack epidemic. But this time the response was different. When white suburban communities started losing kids to opioid overdoses, the talk shifted from punishment to treatment. Suddenly, there was care and understanding that addiction is a disease, not a moral failure. This shift should have happened decades ago during the crack epidemic. Better late than never maybe, but the double standard is impossible to miss. There are also the users themselves, not the stereotypical addicts from movies, but ordinary people. The lawyer who does a line before a big case to come down. The construction worker who uses it to finish a 12-hour shift. The college student who takes it at parties and thinks they can handle it. Many can for a while, but cocaine is tempting. It makes you feel like the best you. And when that fades, you feel worse than before. The urge to use again, to get that feeling back, can be overwhelming. Cocaine addiction does not always look like the dramatic falls in films. Sometimes it's a slow decay. A person starts using for fun, then weekly, then daily. They spend too much money. They lie to friends and family. They become irritable, paranoid, unable to feel happy without the drug. Their relationships suffer, their work suffers. They know they should stop, but they cannot or do not want to. The drug has become the center of their life. And then there are the overdoses. With fentanyl-laced cocaine, people thinking they take a familiar drug, instead take something far more dangerous. They take what they think is a safe dose and stop breathing. Some are found in time saved with naloxone. Others are not so lucky. Their families are left with questions, grief, and often shame. Society still judges those who die from drug overdoses differently than those who die from other illnesses. The human cost goes beyond users and producers. It includes police officers risking lives to enforce unenforceable laws. Judges sending people to prison knowing it will not solve the problem. Doctors and nurses in emergency rooms seeing the same patients again and again. Overdose recovery relapse. Social workers and counselors trying to help with too few resources. Journalists reporting on the drug trade murdered for it. Politicians trying to change the system targeted by cartels or voted out by a public wanting simple answers to hard problems. The cost is not just in deaths and arrests, but in lost potential. How many people could have added to society, could have been artist, scientist, parents, friend, if they were not lost to addiction or jail? How many communities could have thrived if not torn apart by the drug trade? How much money could have gone to schools, healthcare, roads, instead of to prisons and police? It is a huge waste, and it is not over, not even close. So here we are, over a century since cocaine was first isolated. Over 50 years since the drug war began. What have we learned? We learned prohibition does not work. You cannot arrest your way out of a drug problem. As long as people want drugs, there will be supply. And that supply will be run by criminals ready to use violence for profit. We learned addiction is a medical issue, not a moral one. People struggling with substance abuse need treatment, not jail. Harm reduction, meeting people where they are and helping them stay safe, saves lives. We learned the drug trade is tied to bigger issues of poverty, inequality, and no opportunity. People grow coca or sell drugs because they have few other choices. People use drugs to handle trauma and mental illness, or the simple despair of feeling no future. And we learned our current approach cannot last. We cannot keep spending trillions of dollars and sacrificing hundreds of thousands of lives chasing a drug-free world that will never exist. The story of cocaine is a story of human ambition and human mistake. It is the story of a simple plant used safely for thousands of years, changed by science and capitalism into one of the most destructive forces in the modern world. It is a story of how good wishes to ease pain, to cure illness, to protect society can lead to terrible outcome. It is also a story of how we choose who to punish and who to feel sorry for, how we made poverty a crime while treating rich drug users gently, how we waged war on our own people in the name of saving. The white powder, once in a pharmacy bottle, once prescribed by doctors and sold in soda, left a trail of bodies across the continents. It funded guerrillas and paramilitaries. It corrupted governments. It filled prisons and cemeteries. And it shows no sign of stopping. The question is not if cocaine will keep being made and used at will. The question is if we will keep using the same failed plans, or if we will finally have the courage to try something new, to treat drug use as a public health issue, not a criminal one, to invest in treatment, not jail, to fix the root causes: poverty, trauma, inequality, that built to both making and using drugs. The powder that created the most violent time in history is still with us. But the violence is not in the drug itself. It is in the system we built around it. A prohibition system that ensures only criminals profit. That only force is used to control it. That only the most vulnerable suffer the results. Until we are ready to face the truth. Until we admit the drug war has been a terrible failure. The violence will continue. The deaths will continue. The waste will continue. The miracle drug that once promised to cure all our problems instead showed the deepest sickness in our society. Our willingness to sacrifice the most vulnerable among us, chasing an impossible dream. That is the true legacy of cocaine. Not the high, not the parties, not the glamour, but the bodies. Always the bodies. Thank you for watching. If this video made you think, made you question what you knew, then I did my job. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, and subscribe if you want more deep stories about what shaped our world. Until next time, stay curious, stay doubtful, and stay safe.